Great. So we're open for questions and points. Can I ask you, as you do so, first of all, introduce yourself and your organisation or country, if relevant. Please be concise. And please, can everyone use the microphone? I know some people feel that they can project and they have a loud voice, but some of us, as we get older, our hearing isn't so brilliant and there's background noise. So if everyone could please use the microphones, would be very appreciated. Okay, we have a lady here.
They're not working.
I'll take three and then we'll give our panellists a chance to respond.
I'm Karen Colbart from the Harry Guggenheim Foundation. Both of you have mentioned opposition and violence among the self-sufficient groups in this area. And I'm wondering if there's any civil society initiative to try to bring ethnic groups closer together to focus them as a team against the actions of the state rather than having them fragmented at home.
Thank you. I'll take a couple more if there are people. No, not right now. Okay. Oh, yes. Well, over here, please.
Hi, I'm E.J. Flynn with the Human Rights Officer with the UN Counterterrorism Executive Directorate. And I also really appreciated the contributions, and I'm sure that there's a great broad agreement on the principle that with respect to what's happening now and the violations that are taking place, that there has to be action to safeguard human rights, and that government policies, and for that matter, perhaps some actions of the insurgent groups have to be addressed. But that, of course, is ultimately symptomatic, I guess, of an underlying issue, which is the political issue that you referred to. And, you know, how can that be dealt with? Because, you know, while being a staunch human rights defender, I would also, you know, want to advance the thought that there is a challenge of an armed insurgency, which I guess ultimately is seeking to break off from the state. So how can that be dealt with within a human rights or human security framework? Thank you.
Okay, we'll have, if you want to reply to those two.
Share it.
Share it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll respond to the last question on the. Yes, indeed, there is, of course, India is also rapidly changing. It's not the same old state that we know. For example, just before the visit of the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial execution, the number of extrajudicial literally cliffed. That in 2008-2009, we document about 500 in just the state of Manipur, where about 2.5 million people live. It reduced to about less than 100, and I mean, it literally about less than 20 by 2011. And when the special rapporteur came, it did change. And we are told it's because the incentive structure have also changed within the soldiers. Earlier, they used to give 4 credits for killing a terrorist. Now it has been reduced to 2. And we would like to see that it goes to -4. In a way, it's a gain of the civil society. The underlying political issues, there has been statements by the opposition groups of the models that they have thrown out, talking about certain integration of certain ethnic communities, or a plebiscite wherein people can express what they would like to, they're determining their political status. But frankly, I think there has to be a safe space where these people can come out and actually place their position. In this whole war on terrorism, very unfortunately, there is absolutely no space where people can actually articulate these issues. And given a chance and realistically given an opportunity to these political groups, that might not be complete secession or a new republic formation in those areas. People could be still talking about a space where they can try and determine this. I love James Anaya's interpretation of self-determination in a society where people, they are intermingling, and in a globalized society. It is about respecting the two fundamental values of equality and freedom, and creating new institutions where these, the collectives can find a way of controlling their own destiny rather than having to be living under the boots of the military for almost half a century. So given a realistic space and opportunity to engage, I mean, me as a human rights defender from the civil society cannot prescribe, but obviously if these spaces are being provided, I think a situation will emerge where people would see which is best in their interest. And I don't think it will be a case for any of the indigenous group to join Burma or have a republic or join China. I don't think these are good options for any realistic possibility. But a space wherein you can find that your destiny is within your control rather than given off to general this or general that is what people are basically looking at.
Thank you. If you could address the first question, but if you want to add anything to what Babu said, do feel free.
No, so I will go to the first question. Like, yes, there is a civil society process to bring the ethnic groups together. But we also need to understand the Northeast region. It's a 40 million people state, and we have 200 recognized ethnic groups, and most of them have their even armed opposition groups. So it's a real struggle for civil society to bring them together and to involve in them in this the whole issue of counter-terrorism issue and all. But the thing is that civil society organizations, or especially women groups, they involve in bringing them together in the process of dialogue to maintain peace in the region. But the situation of women organizations, again, we involve in the informal discussions, we bring them together, we bridge the ethnic divides, but we are not in the formal process of any dialogue. So that is the real struggle for women organization in Northeast, to create a space for women groups in the peace building process, so it will be more effective to bring the groups, all the groups together in one place.
Thank you. Want to add something, Babu?
Yeah. Also, in fact, the platform that Bondita comes from, Women in Governance, is basically a multi-ethnic women looking at how they get integrated into the governance structure and policy decision. The network that we come from, or the Northeast Network for Human Rights Defender, is also a multi-ethnic thing. So there are many fundamentally, people can still be debating about how much land and territory your imagined kind of states or nations are going to continue. But what is very fundamental is right to food, for example. There cannot be two opinions about it. So there are being alliances being formed on issues which are most fundamental to every ethnic group. So civil society efforts on these lines are very much ongoing. It needs support and solidarity.
Thank you. Another round of questions. Yes, I'm seeing a hand here.
Thank you. Sophia Hasselsteig, I work with Conciliation Resources, a London-based peace-building organisation. Babu, I just wanted to build on the comments you just made answering EJ's question. When you were talking about engaging with these groups or creating the political space, could you share a bit more about when civil society actors try to do that, what happens? And does the labelling of these organizations as terrorist organizations, does that have a direct impact on the space for being able to engage with those groups? So that's quite a precise question. And also a quick question to Bondita as well. You're speaking very eloquently about sexual violence as a weapon of war in this particular context. But I was wondering, is there anything specific as well about sexual violence in terrorism and anti-terrorism, you know, as a weapon? Are you seeing anything specific about that? There might not be, but I was wondering. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? You want to? That's very shy. Just let me reiterate that we are operating during the discussion under Chatham House rules. So, Leah said that earlier, but let me reiterate that. So you don't need to feel shy about asking questions on any topic during this discussion. Okay. Please, George, go first.
Well, Sophie, I think we are walking in very at the edge at this moment if we try to respond to this, because we have to go back home. And of course, there has been a lot of efforts from quite early in the day. In fact, the role that church had played in the Naga insurgency and trying to negotiate, I think, dates back to 1958 onwards. The fact that the process continues even today in 2012 talks about how difficult a terrain we are talking about. The truth is, whatever processes are going on is not coming out in the open, precisely because the space is so narrow. And tomorrow, if you go and start talking to some guerrilla leaders, when you come out, you can be booked as terrorist collaborators. And this is the shrinking space which is so problematic. And neutral bodies like ICRC, for example, are not given access to these areas at all. Only recently, in fact, they are able to do some programs in these areas, training kind of journalists and people like that. So, we know that there is processes, but it is not out in the public space. So we would have to dig a little deeper to be able to answer those questions.
Yeah, I would also like to add on the Babu's thing, like nowadays, recently that 1 militant group, that Alpha, the United Liberal Front of Assam, they have come forwarded for the negotiation. This peace process is going on, and there are civil society groups involved in bringing them to the dialogue process. But as I said, like when one faction has come forwarded for the negotiation, the other faction is still active. So it is always difficult. Then again, like the questions are raised on the civil society groups who come forward for the negotiation. There's a threat also involved to that. And sometimes it seems that it's completely controlled by the government, though the civil society representation is there, but the whole discussion is controlled by government. And many times it is seen like that. And can you repeat the next question?
Sorry, maybe it wasn't very clear. I was just wondering, the microphone.
Sorry, maybe it wasn't very clear. I was wondering is there something specific about sexual violence as a weapon in terrorism and counterterrorism? As in, we know that it's a weapon of war, but is there something specific about the way sexual violence is being used in your particular context?
Yeah. As a record, and we have a document there, I have put there, there's a study on this women in security, and we have documented cases of sexual violence. It is already there, the silent whisper. It's lying on the table. Yeah, most of the cases, what we have referred in this study, is taken place during the counterinsurgency operation. It's basically, it's used as a weapon of war, and still these cases are going on, and we are dealing with this case. But problem is that as it is, AFSPA is there, so it can be, these cases cannot be taken up by the local administration, as security forces are involved in this case, so they are enjoying this impunity on this. So, but it is.
What about from the other side?
Yeah, it's equally. It is equally.
Right, I think we have someone. Yeah.
Okay, this is not a question, but just a comment. Just as I mentioned earlier, that the way in which a state responds to insurgency or terrorism, how it can no longer have a very militaristic strategy, I think it also applies equally to the way insurgent groups can behave and what is acceptable. So kind of mindless violence and terrorist attacks are no longer being accepted by the community as it would have been earlier. So I think that really opens up the space for civil society to engage, not only from to engage with the state, but also to engage with the insurgent group itself. Just a comment.
Thank you. And can I remind people that even if they've spoken already, to introduce themselves, because people will be coming in and out during